Is Donald Trump the next president of America? This Republican frontrunner has called for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States. In an official statement, the apparently Islamophobic property billionaire urged a stop on Muslims seeking to enter America until our country's representatives can figure out what's going on. He also stated that many Muslims harbour a hatred towards Americans and should be kept out of the country. Trump's words hardened after the Paris massacre by Daesh Takfiri terrorists and a mass shooting in San Bernardino, California, leaving 14 dead and 21 injured. But a White House spokesman condemned his comments as entirely inconsistent with the kinds of values that were central to the founding of this country. The Council on American-Islamic Relations added, anti-Muslim hysteria has become a prominent feature in his campaign, and US Democratic presidential contender Hillary Clinton called Trump's remarks reprehensible, prejudiced, and divisive. America's current president, Barack Obama, observed, ISIL does not speak for Islam. They are thugs and killers, part of a death cult, and they account for a tiny fraction of more than 1 billion Muslims around the world, including millions of patriotic Muslim Americans who reject their hateful ideology. Are American politicians or the media primarily responsible for creating an atmosphere of fear and hate? Will Donald Trump become the president of the US? And if he does, what will it mean for the world? These are the simple questions we sought to answer. So Donald Trump has called for that total and complete shutdown of all Muslims and a ban on Muslims entering the US. How would you describe Donald Trump in light of his apparently Islamic and racist outbursts? That's what we put to the American public.
Well, most people in the United States actually think he's batshit crazy. I'm not alone in that. There's very few people in the United States that support that kind of thing.
I think that it is against what American values are. I think that the country has religious freedom, and to ban Muslims from coming in the country is completely un-American and ridiculous.
I would say it's not American-like. First of all, it's not constitutional to do that. And second of all, discriminating against a group of people just because some of the people that follow the same religion take a more radical stance. It happens in every religion, and just because it happened in the Islamic religion, we shouldn't be discriminating just that whole group of people just because of a few of them.
Not someone that I would be a friend with, not someone whose views I agree with. We are America, land of opportunity, so it's here for everybody,
Horrifying. Just terrible. It's not American. It's I put something on Couchsurfing inviting any Muslim who has no place to go at the holiday season to come to my house for a potluck dinner. I think most of the Republican candidates are just shameful people.
I would describe it as a bit childish. The issue is not with Muslims. The issue is with radicalized Muslims. So to ban the 99% of Muslims that are not radicalized is a foolish thing to do.
I think what the right response in that regard is really we should be, as a country, re-looking at our visa, the way we're bringing in our visas, no matter what the nationality is or the individual. But we need to take a step back, kind of look at what our process is. And I think that's really what he was trying to say. And I think he called out a group in general that's been attacking this country terrorist-wise. Unfortunately, the background of it is the case. And that really the right process is to take another step back and understand what our visa process is.
A man who has absolutely no qualifications to run for president in the United States.
I mean, it's outrageous. Like, why would you do that to, one group or one religion? It's not right, for actions of a few. I feel like it's totally uncalled for, and it is not necessary. He's an idiot for saying that. I don't know if I can say that, but he's an idiot.
It makes no sense. You have to be more comprehensive, more complete with whomever you're targeting.
I find it quite shocking, and I don't actually understand how they're going to make a ban completely, because are they going to look at, does it say on people's passports whether or not they're Muslims? I don't know.
What assessment have our experts made of Donald Trump in the light of his call for a shutdown of Muslims and a ban on Muslims entering the US?
Whilst Donald Trump's comments are wholly irresponsible and completely inflammatory, they must be put in context of who the messenger is and who is the person who's receiving the message. Whilst what Donald Trump has said is completely reprehensible, in my opinion, this is what you expect from an imbecile. Just like George W. Bush, what comes out of his mouth is redolent of his thought process. What's more worrying to me are those who cheer and support the message en masse. When he made these initial comments, the sound of those whooping and hollering behind him was, for me, the more worrying. In other words, blaming the imbecile for what comes out of his mouth is one thing. The larger picture of those behind him supporting that message, for me, is far more troubling.
I don't think Donald Trump's recent comments about Muslims, in particular barring all Muslims' entry to the United States, particularly paint him in a worse light than he already has been seen. He's always been controversial and outrageous. And if you like, these are no surprise, although they are quite disgusting comments. Sadly, however, I think he's not only capturing the zeitgeist in the US, he's really just a symptom of the wider problem of anti-Muslim hatred, but also other hatreds in the US.
What institutions do the public believe are more to blame for having created an atmosphere of fear and hate? US politicians or the US media, and why?
I believe it's the US media. I think both have some to blame, but I think it's mostly the US media because they like to play on the fear of the people instead of just sometimes reporting on what's happening. They report more on people's opinions, and sometimes that can scare other people.
Neither. I don't think it's the media or the politicians. I guess, well, if you call Trump a politician, but he's not really. He's just he's a clown. He's not a politician. He's not serious about what he's doing.
I would have to blame the US media because I feel like Americans who are in support of such a ban live in areas that possibly have less diversity, and that the US media fuels the fear.
I would say U.S. media. The media is the way that information is passed basically throughout households, throughout the country. So they get to put up their agenda. They get to put up what they believe is what they think is right, not even what we are agreeing with or saying that we want to see. They kind of get to make the rules about what we get to see. So.
Well, the media has a great deal to do with it because it's corporate owned. There are only 6 media companies that control all the media in the United States, and I feel they're part of the 1% that are promoting their own agenda.
There are a lot of images being portrayed in the media that kind of downplays people's ethnicities, people's heritages, be it Middle Eastern, black, white, whatever. But until you actually, have a conversation with somebody, you really don't know, what that person is going through.
Probably the politicians. And I don't know, it's just like, I think it could be a lot simpler, and they take something small and they make it escalate more than what it is instead of finding a solution, Just because one does wrong, and then the other one wants to do wrong too, and a wrong doesn't make it right. So, once it's done wrong, I say just fix it and let it go, instead of going back and forth. That's what I say.
I'd say the media. The media can be very opinionated, so it's good to source out all the media outlets to gather a full view, both sides of the argument. And that's something that could definitely be worked on.
Oh, I definitely think the media. I think the media is biased. Depending on which media channel you look at, is which biases you'll get out of it. So I think media in general creates a big bias in the country, and I think the individuals need to be intelligent enough to see through it.
A bit of both, but basically misunderstanding of what the rest of the world is really like. Many Americans never leave the country and don't really understand what it's like to be in a different place with different people.
Probably the media. The media makes everything like sound a lot worse than what it really is, but the politicians also at the same time don't help either, kind of thing.
I think the U.S. media has a lot to do with it because, you know, like any media, they want ratings and they want to blow things out of proportion. And at the same time, I feel like some of our politicians can use some work as well, but definitely the media.
The media certainly stir things up, and I think the recent attack in San Bernardino has tapped into a lot of people's fears. I'm British, and I find a lot of Americans tend to be very suspicious of cultures that they don't understand, for want of a better description.
It's always both. No further explanation required.
We invited our experts to assess the relative contribution of American politicians and the American media towards the state of hate and fear.
My answer to this is quite simple. While US politicians must be able to and are able to propagate these messages, it is through the medium of media by which they can do this and amplify that message. So for me, the answer for that quite simply is the media. Let's look at it in the wake of Donald Trump's messages. There was a complete swathe of media attention for him, providing him yet another platform to spout these horrible, vile, venal, vitriolic comments. The answer then is the media. As long as the media has powerful echo chambers allowing these messages, this message is allowed to spread further. The answer therefore is the media is far more powerful with respect to this.
It's not really possible to separate the US media, the US political system and even the legal system from each other. Actually, our argument is that they all sort of mutually constitute themselves, they support each other, and they keep reproducing the problem. Unfortunately, all three are complicit in creating an anti-Muslim climate. And to be fair, historically, that's what the three institutions have always done. They've created negative climates of fear and hatred right from the foundation of the United States, whether it's against the indigenous population, African Americans, in these days Muslims. It's a repetitive cycle.
How dangerous would the world become if Donald Trump were to be the President of the United States? We asked the public.
I definitely think there'll be a war. I definitely think he would divide a lot of people. Right now is not the time to discriminate against Muslims or, you know, people who practice Islam or whatnot. I think that him becoming president is going to affect everyone and divide people, and it's going to be a racial issue.
We would see a nuclear war. And there wouldn't be much left of the world if Trump becomes president.
I believe rather dangerous. I think it would be a time of disconcern, a time of unknowing, a time of a person that's maybe a little too radical for what we need at this point in time. And it would make me think about going back to the Dominican Republic.
It'd be horrible for American citizens as well as the world. We'd be bombing even more than we are now. Unconscionable to think about it.
I don't think it will become any more dangerous. However, I think we would become a joke. You know, I think he's a great businessman, but I don't know if he's qualified to run a country.
That would be bad. That would be very terrible. And I hope no one's taking him serious. I think he's just filling the spot right now to just, like I said, just to have something to do with his life, you know. And he could never get not a vote for me or my family.
I mean, it wouldn't be too dangerous. The president, he's only got so much say. A lot of stuff, you know, goes like back and forth through Congress before it even hits him. So a lot of the ideas and whatnot, it'd probably get shut down real easy. The same way that, you know, Obama's ideas get shut down.
I don't think it would be any more or less dangerous, but it just does not bear thinking about.
I feel like if he became president of the United States, it's my opinion, but I feel like it would be kind of like a joke kind of thing. Like, to be honest, I agree with some things that he does say, but I don't think he's a good presidential leader.
Well, at this point, I don't think it's going to be terribly likely. So I would imagine it would become dangerous, but I don't think it's very likely to happen.
He doesn't stand for anything American, and he would, I think, blow up everyone else out of anger, and I don't think that's right. You know, you need to have some sort of leader that's going to represent the United States for what it is, you know, land of the free.
Our experts gave their view on the dangers which President Donald Trump could create on the world stage.
There's no doubt in my mind that if Donald Trump were to become the President of the United States, the world would be placed in a much more precarious position than it is now. We have a person who hasn't found a war he wouldn't send other people's children to die for. He feels that it's a complete game. Human life is cheap and human blood is cheap. Worse than that, the blood of some is apparently cheaper than others. The world will become a far more dangerous place with fingers poised precariously over the buttons of missiles and nuclear weapons, and war would become nothing more than a habit, and it would become a game.
Well, God forbid that Donald Trump does become the President of the United States. It will push things, I guess, further towards even more violence and hatred. However, ultimately, he is the more honest version of what's already happening with the US. You know, he perhaps is less polite or more open about views which are ultimately, if not openly expressed, are enacted in policy already in the US foreign policy and even in their domestic policy. We've all been complaining about him wanting to ban Muslims entering the US, yet a law already has barred a whole load of Muslims from being able to enter the US in the last couple of weeks if they have a visa of certain countries. And those countries are not countries, for example, that are currently complicit in what's going on with Daesh. These are, you know, other Muslim countries who have no threat to pose.
How likely is it that Donald Trump will become the US president? The public said this.
Oh, it's not. That's not happening. There's no way.
He will likely be the Republican nominee, and Hillary Clinton will hopefully beat him.
I think it's very likely now because I believe he's leading the Republican candidates at this point. So it's just find out if he's going to be the nominee.
That's hard to tell. I'm hoping not, but Hitler came to power under sort of the same premises of Donald Trump, and unfortunately a great deal of our electorate is not that intelligent, so it's not out of the realm of possibility.
Slim to none. Slim to none. I don't think it's going to happen.
I give him like 15%, plus or minus.
No chance, not at all.
Very unlikely. I think it's really a non-issue. It's not anything that anybody has to be worried about.
He's been ahead in the polls, but will he win? Our experts gave their perspective.
I feel that the likelihood, thankfully, of Donald Trump becoming president is, in fact, quite minimal. Whilst I do believe that he propagates a message of hate that is within a minority of the United States, the problem is that those relative to him who spout just as vitriolic comments but don't do it quite so often or so loudly will look in relative terms to be the more moderate. Therefore, the problem isn't so much that Donald Trump would become the president, but the fact that a lesser form of evil, a lesser form of Donald Trump would become president, simply because they look to be more moderate when you look at their terms in relative terms, but they're not. If you look at Hillary Clinton, for example, her comments are just as vitriolic and hateful and spiteful, but couched in much more moderate terms. Any element of white supremacy, for example, looks more moderate compared to Donald Trump. It's apples and pears, but the pear is still rotten compared to the even more rotten apple.
I'm not an expert on the candidates and the presidential race as such, but it does seem that Donald Trump's anti-Muslimness has rather got him to gain in popularity, and that does make it a possibility now. It seems that he could well become president. Let's wait and see, but things don't look good. And we may be seeing, you know, a new tipping point having been breached.
We wondered if the public had a view on why the US presidential candidate lineup doesn't appear to be filled with intelligent, inspirational and diplomatic candidates.
Well, it's like any place in the world. That's not the kind of people who run for office typically. Look at your country, right? Same problem.
You know, I don't know if a lot of people have faith in the political system anymore. I don't know if our younger generations are seeing positive influences and role models that are leading the political candidates. So I don't know if this is an avenue that a lot of people are are seeing at this time. So we're putting up what we believe the person who has, 50% of what we're looking for instead of the 80 to 90% that should.
I don't know. I'm Democratic, so I have nothing against Republicans, but everything I stand for, the Democrats stand for. So that's my issue.
I think it is. You got to get past the whole Donald Trump saying whatever he wants thing. But, look at someone like Jeb Bush or Ben Carson. They've really smart guys. I mean, Jeb Bush, he's had two relatives already in the White House, and he's been a senator for a long time. So, I think there's a lot of good talent. You just got to find the talent and source it out.
I think, there's an opportunity now, especially the last 8 years and what we've gone through as a country and who we have today in the office, is to really look at deep down inside us as a country and make sure we make the right decision.
I think it's money, really, and politics. I wish we can get a younger leader here that's very proactive for the United States community. That's what we need. We don't need somebody with a lot of money and just do whatever they want. We need somebody that's going to be here for us and the people.
Because in order to run for president in this country, you, one, have to have an enormous ego, and two, have to have an enormous amount of money. And that is not exactly the kind of person you really want leading your country. You want someone who is, of course, diplomatic, inspirational, smart, not rich and egotistical.
What's the expert perspective on the reasons US presidential candidates do not seem to be consistently drawn from amongst the most inspiring and diplomatic individuals in American society?
The current presidential lineup is not filled with influential and inspirational characters because I feel that they're echoing a certain element of society at present. That is, a society hell-bent and obsessed with warmongering, with demonization, with Islamophobia, and with propagating the worst elements of the human condition. War, a willingness to fight, a willingness to ostracize. I think this is a reflection of the current climate. People want to find the other person, the bad guy. And as long as there are people willing to stand up and point fingers, you're going to get a parade of candidates as we currently do.
The US presidential race for a long time, I think, has been, if maybe it always has been, but certainly in my lifetime, been something that's a charade, if you like. It's about who's behind the candidates rather than the quality of the candidates themselves. I think even when you did have quite intelligent candidates, for example, like Obama, even like Bill Clinton, even like Hillary Clinton, they only get to where they get once they've compromised their principles away, once the actual skills that they have are not really the priority for them being pushed into the leadership positions that they're in, when actually it is about the compromises they've made on issues, whether it's Palestine, whether it's about healthcare, whether it's about economic reform. Once these things have all kind of principles have all been melted down or discarded in favor of things that ultimately support the neoliberal and neoconservative agenda, it's then that these people become front runners. And in that scenario, you don't have to be clever, and thus you could get that kind of lineup of people who are, shall we say, less than inspirational in what is really a superficial race. The political class in America is not really led by the politicians.
Many are shocked by the fact that an apparently Islamophobic person can stand to be president of one of the world's most militarily, economically and politically powerful countries. Many more are asking, if Donald Trump actually wins the presidency, what would that mean for America's approach towards other countries, the Muslim faith and world peace? Only time will tell.